Good happy Friday evening, and welcome to the Riley King Network Investigates, right here on the Riley King Network. Tonight on the Riley King Network Investigates, where is Susan Powell? Her disappearance, young sons, horrific death, haunts family. That's all, starting right now on the Riley King Network Investigate. Hello, and welcome. Thank you for joining us for this Friday evening edition of the Riley King Network Investigates. Where is Susan Powell? Her disappearance, her young sons, horrific death haunts the family. Her body is still missing. Her husband killed himself and their sons. Let's begin. Chuck and Judy Cox have spent the past 8 years in England while trying to find some semblance of justice after their son-in-law, Josh Powell, murdered their 2 young grandsons. When it finally seemed like they were on the verge of finding some closure earlier this year, the coronavirus pandemic brought everything to a halt. I don't know anything else I could have done, and they're still dead. My daughter's still missing, and now the children are dead, said Chuck Cox. I had them safe. They were in my care. His daughter, Josh Powell's wife, Susan Powell, was the mother of Brandon and Charlie Powell. She disappeared under suspicious circumstances in 2009, and her body has never been found. In February of 2012, Josh Powell killed himself along with Brandon in 5 and Charlie 7 in the house explosion during a supervised visit. Josh Powell locked out the social worker from the home upon their arrival. Why take the kids? Why? It makes absolute no sense, said Cox. After the house explosion, Chuck and Judy Cox sued the Washington State Department of Social and Health Services in civil court, alleging that its negligence contributed to the death of their grandsons. The lawsuit was thrown out in 2015, but was appealed and revived in 2019 by the 9th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals. The fact of the matter is they're the only ones who could have protected the children at that point, Cox said of the child welfare agency run by DSHS. They're the ones with responsibility. The wrongful death civil trial began in February in Tacoma, Washington, but was interrupted in March as COVID-19 swept through the nation. We have been robbed of 3 precious lives, and it's just devastating to think the same person did it. Dennis Cox Ernest, Susan Powell's sister, told ABC affiliate KOMO TV in 2012. What happened to Susan Powell remains a mystery to this day. She was reported missing in December of 2009 when the family was living in West Valley City, Utah. That night, Josh Powell claimed he had gone on a camping trip in the middle of the night with their sons. Susan Powell, he said, stayed home because she was tired. As soon as I heard that he was back and Susan was not with them, I instantly said to myself, what has he done? Chrissy Howell, Susan Powell's friend. Susan would have never allowed him to ever take the boys out in the winter to the desert in the middle of the night. Never believed his story at all. West Valley City Police Detective Ellis Maxwell, who led the investigation into Susan Powell's disappearance, said that when investigators arrived at the house, there were no signs of disturbance or physical altercations. At the bank in which she'd work inside a safe deposit box that belonged to her, investigators discovered a handwritten will and testament. In the will, Susan Powell had written about how bad her marriage had become and that Josh Powell had taken out a $1 million life insurance policy on her. If I die, her note said, it may not be an accident. That is our biggest piece of evidence, Maxwell said. It's her last words. There was no doubt that this document was authorized by Susan. Authorities also determined that Josh Powell had filed paperwork to withdraw money from her retirement account about 10 days after she had disappeared. At the time of her disappearance, Susan Powell's close friends said her marriage had been in turmoil for years and that she had never seen a divorce lawyer. She'd be really happy. He'd been a great husband, and she said he really changed. He became not affiliate, said the Cox family attorney, Anna Brimmer. Her friends also said Susan Powell would complain about the lack of intimacy from her husband. He kept her at arm's length. He wouldn't kiss her anymore. He wouldn't touch her. He wouldn't hold her hand, said Helen Howell. Josh and Susan's marriage reaches rock bottom in the summer of 2008. Josh and Susan are constantly fighting. They're arguing in front of the kids. Josh is exhibiting extreme control over Susan, said Dave Cawley, the host of Cold and Investigation podcast on the case. Well, said Susan Powell would email her a lot saying she wants to do everything in power to save my marriage before I walk away. Chuck Cox said that after his daughter's will was found, he felt frustrated that authorities didn't arrest Josh Powell. I felt they had plenty of evidence to arrest him, Chuck Cox said. Police publicly declared Josh Powell as a person of interest about a week after his wife went missing. However, despite suspicious, Josh Powell was never charged in Susan Powell's disappearance. Those close to the family say Josh Powell acted strangely in wake of the wife's his wife's disappearance. He was observed cleaning his minivan and the garage. It was really odd to me because he was running around the house grabbing piles of towels and putting them in the washer, and finally we're like, "You've got to go to your interview with the police," said Jennifer Graves, Josh Powell's sister. Friends and close relatives also said that he never participated in search efforts or showed urgency to find his wife. There was no point at which Josh ever seemed to even be concerned that Susan was missing, said Well, he never participated in any of the massive efforts that myself and relatives and friends launched to put out flyers in malls and parking lots. When detectives pushed Josh Powell on the details from the night his wife went missing, he said he could not remember the events leading up to her disappearance. "I just don't remember what activity we were doing," he had told Maxwell. Investigators also questioned then 4-year-old Charlie, and day after his mother disappeared. Charlie confirmed to investigators that he went camping the night his mother vanished, saying, "My dad and my mom and my little brother were also there." The child said Mommy was in the van, but didn't come back with us. A pretty significant thing a 4-year-old to tell a detective, said Rebecca Morris, who authored a book about the case titled "If I Can't Have You." "My mom stayed at Dinosaur National Park. My mom stayed where the crystals are," Charlie had also said. Many people interpreted Charlie's statement to mean that his mother was dead. However, the toddler also made comments that there were clearly false, including taking an airplane to go camping. "There's a pile of circumstantial evidence," said Maxwell. "Is there enough there to arrest him and book him into jail and hold him accountably? Absolutely there is. Could we? No." Maxwell said that the Salt Lake County District Attorney refused to file charges without a body until a year had passed. ABC News reached out to the district attorney at the time, but they declined to respond to this claim and refused to comment on this case. Back in January of 2010, less than a month after his wife disappeared, Josh Powell said he had thought to get away from media attention and move with his sons into his father Susan Powell's house in Puyallup, Washington. In an effort to get more information from authorities, Graves wore a wire and confronted her brother about his wife's disappearance. "Suddenly, I just shoved Josh into the bathroom, and at that point, I was like, drop all the presents. Just tell me where her body is," said Graves. He continued to deny knowing anything about Susan Powell's disappearance, and the situation escalated. Steve Powell then kicked Graves out of the house. "I regret not getting the confession, but I don't regret going," said Graves. In 2010, about a year after the investigators first spoke to Charlie on the day after his mother's disappearance, they sat down with the 5-year-old again and asked him about what he remembered from the night. "We can't talk about Susan or camping. I always keep things a secret," Charlie said in the interview. "I didn't want to talk to you on this long. I mean, this many minutes. Now I'm done." The only thing we got out of Charlie that time was that he said that she went camping, but she didn't come home with them. Then he kind of claimed up after that, said Detective Sergeant Gary Sanders of the Pierce County Sheriff's Department. All the while, new details began to emerge about Stephen Powell's unusual friction and inappropriate behavior toward his daughter-in-law, Susan Powell. In a 2011 interview with ABC News, he alleged that Susan Powell had made sexual advances towards him. "She told me that part of the reason they moved to Utah was to get away from her father-in-law, Stephen Powell. She was like, he is the most filthy, foul, sick, disgusting pervert the world has ever seen. He's in love with me," said Helen Well. "Susan was very, very sexual with me. She was very flatterous," Stephen Powell told ABC News. "We interacted in a lot of sexual ways because Susan enjoys doing that. I enjoy doing that." "Why are you telling everyone that? That's not your benefit," Graves said of her father. "But somehow, in my dad's own twisted mind, he thought that was the greatest strategy to keep the dogs off Josh or something. I don't know." Dennis Koch Ernest said her sister, Susan Powell, had complained about her father-in-law inappropriate advances and that she had told Josh Powell about them too. She was extremely upset about that and disturbed, but even more disturbed when Josh just said that. "You know, that's his dad," said Cox Ernest. Shortly after, ABC News interviewed Utah police, searched the Powell family home in Puyallup, where Josh Powell and his sons were living at that time. Investigators found home videos taken by Steve Powell that showed secret recordings of his daughter-in-law's body parts and video deals in which he smelled her underwear and exposed his love and sexual feelings towards her. The search also yielded dozens of computer disks containing images of women and young girls that focused on their private parts, according to prosecutors. Police arrested Stephen Powell in November of 2011 and charged him with various in possession of child pornography. Josh Powell was named as a subject in the child pornography investigation. Following Stephen Powell's arrest, Josh Powell lost custody of his two sons. Chuck and Judy Cox were awarded temporary custody of the children, in which they acted essentially as foster parents. The state had official custody, and Josh Powell was given weekly supervised visitations. Because of all the things that the police encountered in the search of the Stephen Powell home, it became apparent eventually these boys were at imminent risk of harm. Ted Buck, another attorney for the Cox family. Back in February of 2012, new evidence emerged that a laptop from Josh Powell's Utah home contained images of cartoon pornography. A judge then ordered Josh Powell to undergo a psychiatrical evaluation and take a pornography holographic test. But before Josh Powell could take the evaluation or holography test, he killed himself and the two boys on February 5th, 2012. A state caseworker brought the boys to Powell's home for a supervised visit. He locked the official out. Incapacitated the 5- and 7-year-old children with a hatchet, poured gasoline on them and around the house, and then caused an explosion, according to authorities. A few months later, in June of 2012, Susan Powell was convicted of vandalism charges and sentenced to 2.5 years in prison. The trial court had intentionally dismissed the charges for possession of child pornography in 2012, but the state's Court of Appeals reinstated the charges in 2014. He was convicted of possession of child pornography in 2015 and spent another 2 years in prison. Susan Powell served a total of 7 years in prison before being released in July of 2017. He died of heart problems a year later. Maxwell believes that Josh Powell's murder-suicide was definitely an admission of guilt of Susan Powell's murder. She was going to divorce him. If he can't have her, nobody will, he said. So he essentially kidnaps Susan and most likely murders her and disposes of her body. Where? I have no idea. Nobody knows. The Cox family civil case reconvened at the end of July this year. In August, the jury awarded the family a record of $98.5 million award against the State Department of Social and Health Services. Chuck Cox said he is going to use the reward money to honor his late grandchildren. I intend to use the award to try to help other people so that we can save more children, said Chuck Cox. The judge presided over the case has since reduced the reward to $32 million, $16 million for Charlie and $16 million for their other grandson, Brandon. The Cox family will appeal the court's decision to reduce the jury's verdict, their attorney said. Garvin said Susan Powell's story will continue to live on and inspire others to move in the right direction, to move towards good relationships and get out of the bad situations, abusive situations. And that is it for this Friday evening edition of the Riley King Network Investigates. Thank you for watching this Friday evening edition of the Riley King Network Investigates. See you back here next time for another edition of the Riley King Network Investigates. Good night and goodbye, everyone.